Блюм. Шмовись сложит. Шмовись шмешит. Шмолит попер. Опа. Жук. Нет, да, все так это. Да, пам-пам. Блин, это дофига. Нет, наоборот, вот это он нет. Вот это нет. Ладно. Ну, блин. Ладно, не знаю, что. Брук на. Нравишься? Нет? Нет? Понимаешь? Да. Кот могила. Пес. Ого. Круто. Okay. Next time, either join to it.
На Puzzle English сейчас проходит Черная пятница. Можно учить английский по самой низкой цене в году, скидкой 75%. Больше тарифа премиум навсегда не будет, а значит, это последний шанс получить.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Piano TV. So today I want to tackle something really lofty, and that is the question of why even bother practicing piano at all? So in the last couple videos, we've been talking about goals and planning, and that is really important. You got to do that, stay organized, that's good. But we also have to go a little deeper than that sometimes. What is your underlying drive to practice piano? What's getting you to the bench? Why even bother setting goals? Why is it important to practice piano? I mean, practicing piano doesn't solve world hunger or, you know, do anything crazy like that, so why bother? So in today's video, I want to go on a little bit of a journey with you. And I'm going to share some aspects of my life story that I think are going to be relevant to this discussion. And I want to talk to you about the issue of motivation, and let's try to see if we can find what it is that is driving you to practice piano in the first place. I hope this will be helpful for those of you, like myself, as you'll soon see, who have struggled with motivation over the years. There are probably those of you out there who have never had an issue with motivation when it comes to piano practice, who are just like always intrinsically inspired and motivated, and you've never really needed to think about it too much. And that is awesome for you. I'm kind of jealous, but that is amazing. Keep doing what you're doing. This probably isn't the video for you. But for the rest of us who've maybe like stumbled and had issues with motivation in the past, that's why I want to talk about these things with you. So this is going to be a long video. I can already tell this is a long introduction. So what I want you to do is get comfortable. I don't know if you like drink coffee or tea, but let's do this. I want to challenge you today, and let's really think about the purpose and the meaning behind playing piano. And I just want to say this right from the beginning. I don't want this to be a one-sided conversation. I don't want it just being like me talking at you. And I know that I'm the one in front of the video here, but I really encourage you to leave a comment with your thoughts and maybe your own life experiences and your own ideas on motivation and stuff like that as we get into it. Because maybe, I don't know, maybe I'm like the only one who thinks this way and my ideas are crazy and like way off in left field. Tell me if you think that's true, or if you agree, or if you have like additional things to add. I think it helps all of us to leave a comment. So let's get really into it now. So speaking generally for a second, this isn't just piano practice, but just my life as a whole. Sometimes all I really need is a little bit of planning and I'm good to go. I've got like the enthusiasm and I'm passionate and I'm eager to begin whatever task it is. I just need to like sharpen my focus a little bit and then I'm good. But sometimes I'm unmotivated. And then when I'm unmotivated, I'll think to myself, what better way to get motivated than to do some planning? So I try to motivate myself by planning, and I set goals. And that works for like 2 days, and then my goals end up in the garbage bin, and I'm no better than when I started. And then I'm kind of stumped. Well, what's the problem? And here's what my brain does. My brain goes into like strict teacher mode, like, you know, like kind of like that gnarly teacher you had in your youth that you like shudder at the memory of. That's what my brain does to myself, and it says, you're not self-disciplined enough, I'm not working hard enough, I'm being too lazy. Or maybe I'll think the goal is too challenging, or maybe I'll think the goal isn't challenging enough, Or, you know, the really common one, there's not enough time in the day to do all of this. And the list just goes on with all those negative questions. And obviously there's a big problem with all that, like, negative self-dialogue. That doesn't help anyone. But the bigger question that I really want to talk about with you is when you're pushing yourself, you're planning, and you're trying to motivate yourself and all of this, but it's not working. What do you do? What do you do when piano practice is at like the very bottom of your priority list? Then what? So along that line of thinking, we encounter a couple questions. And these are questions that most of us have asked along the years at least once. And when I do this in the blog post, I'm going to like underline it and bold it because I think it's important. So the first question we sometimes ask ourselves is, should I just quit piano because it's such a struggle? And question number 2 we ask ourselves is, should I just grit my teeth and bear it and persevere because I said I was gonna? So to answer those questions, I want to talk about my life story a little bit because I've done both. I've quit piano for large periods of time, which is kind of a big deal if you're a musician and you teach piano. And I've also gone in the opposite direction where I've like struggled really hard through practicing even though I wasn't like getting anything out of it and it was just breaking my brain. And neither of those choices sound really good either, right? So there's got to be like a better way. So I'm gonna get into this story a little bit. It might be a little bit sprawling, but I promise we'll circle back around to the main point of this video, which is what's the point of even practicing at all? I decided to take my grade 9 and 10 Royal Conservatory exams in adulthood, which is what a lot of people do because they're higher levels and you don't always get to those as a kid. So I was living in Toronto when I was working towards my grade 9, and that was cool. But what wasn't cool is that I was pretty broke. I was living in a tiny apartment and I hated my job. Basically, like, life was pretty grim and uninspiring and I didn't want to have any of that. So that's when I asked myself those two. And that was cool. But what wasn't cool is that I was pretty broke. I was living in a tiny apartment and I hated my job. Basically, like, life was pretty grim and uninspiring and I didn't want to have any of that. So that's when I asked myself those two questions. Do I quit? Is it, like, worth it? Or do I, you know, grit my teeth and bear it? Most people would say that you should just like power through that unhappy job, but again, I wasn't having any of that either. So what I ended up doing was quitting, which created its own little trail of disaster, but it led to one of the best decisions I've ever made, which was starting to teach piano independently. Because there I was broke and jobless, just like that. I just had it. So I was like freaking out a little bit, like, what do I do to start making money right now? And luckily in the past, I had been an employee and I taught piano lessons through an institution. So I had experience with being a piano teacher. I just never actually done it on my own. So I hustled hard, I put up posters in the neighborhood, and I networked with other piano teachers, and I like went crazy on Kijiji and Craigslist and basically did everything. And within 6 months, I had a full schedule. I basically went from feeling like I had absolutely no control over my life was this like drab, dismal thing, to being like the captain of my own ship. It was amazing. And all of that really rapid change happened because of being at this crisis point. Survival instincts can be one of the greatest motivators there are. So anyway, there I am, teaching in Toronto. That's all well and good. But the thing about big cities, and if you live in a big city, you probably already know this, is that people are really good at like whatever they're doing. Like there is no room for mediocrity. So a piano teacher in Toronto doesn't just like have a university degree like peasants. They have like a master's degree and they have their ARCT and like performance and whatever, and they've like played as a backup musician to share. So basically here I am, this like random 20-something with 0 degree. I never went to university and all I had was my grade 8 RCM certificate. Literally the only thing I had going for me is that I had had piano teacher experience in the past. I'd done it for like 5 or 6 years prior. So that was my push to do my grade 9 exam, and it was a really good motivator. I did my exam pretty quickly. It was pretty easy. I got good marks on all of my tests, and I got like, I did a pedagogy exam just to, you know, train myself in teaching and catch up to all these other, you know, super professional, high-powered business teachers. So that was great. Then I got to grade 10, and that's where poop hit the fan and things started to become problematic. So at the point that I started working toward my grade 10, I already had a full piano teaching schedule. I mean, even though I wasn't performing with Cher or anything like that, people were still hiring me, and they were like, you know, they wanted me to keep coming back week after week. So I figured like I had to be doing something right. Even though I didn't have like all these fancy credentials that all these other people have, I was feeling like even though I was a small fish in a giant pond, at least I was a successful small fish. And it was because of this feeling of success that I lost my motivation to do my grade 10 exam. So, I mean, think of it like this way. Say you are in college and you're halfway through your degree and someone comes up to you and says, I'm going to give you your dream job. You do not have to finish school. All you have to do is like, come start working now. And you'll get paid exactly what you'll get paid otherwise, and you know, everything else will be the same, except instead of doing 4 years of schooling, you just have to do 2. What do you say to that, right? I mean, you could keep finishing your degree and, you know, pushing through the last 2 years, but what's the point, right? Like, you're already at where you would end up if you did that schooling. So that's where I was at. I kind of felt like even if I did all this extra schooling and I finished my grade 10 and whatever, still be in the same place. I'd still be doing the same thing that I'm doing now, making the same thing I make now. Nothing would change, so why bother? But I continued plugging away at that grade 10 exam anyway, because I said I was gonna, so I'm gonna do it, right? That was just my mentality at the time. So all while this is happening, life is changing. We moved to a house little house on the prairies, basically, and I, you know, started my own piano studio, and that's been going really well. Things in my life. I started doing piano TV videos. All that's been great. And here I am plugging away at this grade 10 exam, and it's going horrible. So I hauled myself to the piano bench every day, and sometimes I would spend like upwards of 3 hours a day just working. And it wasn't that kind of work that you do, but then afterwards you feel this like gritty sense of satisfaction, like, oh man, I worked so hard, that was awesome. It was just hard. It always felt like a struggle. I dreaded it. It was just something that I felt like I had to do. So my songs barely came together. I worked and worked and worked and worked just for my songs to sound like barely adequate. And then eventually I did my exam. I got a pretty bad mark. I actually did a whole video on why I got such a bad mark for my grade 10 exam, which I'll link to on the screen if you want to go check that out. There are many reasons I got a bad mark on that exam. And my grade 9 exam, by contrast, wasn't like that at all. Everything flowed. It felt seamless. It was still hard work, but it felt like rewarding hard work. It wasn't a struggle. It felt like a challenge that I was equipped to deal with. So after my exam, I quit. I was just done. It was honestly like just such a relief to not be practicing piano anymore after all of that struggle. Now, since I'm a piano teacher, I obviously didn't I still played, right? I have to help my students, but for my own purposes, I had to stop. So let's circle back around to those yucky questions from earlier. Number 1, should I quit because it's just an uphill battle and it's too hard? Or 2, should I just struggle through it and persevere? Or is there maybe another way? But first, let's look at those first 2. As you probably saw in my story, I've kind of experienced both ends of the spectrum. So for the grit your teeth and bear it approach, I think it's a terrible, terrible approach, because all you end up doing is spinning your wheels and burning yourself out, and there's no enjoyment in it at all. And what I find the really big problem with this approach is that a lot of people see, including myself at points, seem to think that it's the right approach. That if you work really, really, really hard and you just deal with the struggle, eventually you'll break through to this magical achievement plateau where the birds are singing and the sun is shining. And it's just like that goal that's just always slightly out of reach. And meanwhile, your day-to-day is just this unbearable torture, just hoping that you might eventually get to that point. So that is problematic. Hard work is good, but hard work that feels painful to do is not good. And quitting isn't any better. I mean, if you hate music or whatever, then quit, obviously. I mean, your life will be better not doing things that you hate. But if you're watching this channel, you probably don't hate music, and neither did I. I had been playing piano since I was 6. I'm a piano teacher. I've been in bands. Obviously the problem was not that I hated music. So quitting did not solve anything. All it did was create just a void in my heart. I felt like getting into a country song there. A little void in my heart. But I'm serious. It's like if you have a really bad fight with one of your friends and then you're not on talking terms anymore. There's just like a feeling of emptiness that it leaves behind. So those are both, like, quitting is bad and gritting your teeth is bad. Neither is a good solution. And that brings us right back around to the whole point of this video, which is why bother practicing piano? How do we take it from this struggle, and how do we find that motivational fuel that makes it feel like seamless and inspiring work? You could have the most amazing practice plans on paper that objectively look great, but what is your deeper motivation to accomplish those goals? What is your push? Why bother going for those goals in the first place? That is the thing you need to find. So another way to look at that is, I don't know, say you have like an amazing car and it's like such a nice car, but if you don't have a fuel source for that car, it doesn't matter, it's not going to run. So with practicing piano, what is your fuel source? So when I was doing my grade 9 exam, my fuel source was the whole idea that I could be my own boss. And I also wanted to keep up with my colleagues and make sure I wasn't like too far down the totem pole. I needed to like earn respect. But when I was doing my grade 10 exam, the only motivator that I had was this vague sense that I should, even though I didn't need to. But I felt like I just have to finish what I started. And that was pretty bad fuel. Admittedly, most people who practice piano don't have extrinsic motivators the way I did with my grade 9. I mean, the motivator of being my own boss is extrinsic, it's external. But most people who play piano do it for intrinsic reasons, like they enjoy it as a relaxing outlet, as a creative outlet, as a way to unwind, as a way to keep their mind sharp, or whatever. There are a lot of good reasons to do it, and I'm on board with all of them, and I practice for all of those reasons too. But despite all that, despite liking piano, despite knowing that it makes me feel good, I've still quit before. I've still set these